Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to our OpenNTF monthly webinar. Today we're going to be talking about Nomad Mobile tips and tricks. So we have a mix of HCL and non-HCL presenters that we have gathered together. Today my name is Howard Greenberg, and along with Graham Akers and Jesse Gallagher, we're your OpenNTF board members who are hosting today's event. We have two folks from HCL, Thomas Hampel and Maxx Sutton, who work on Nomad. Max is the lead developer, I believe, if I'm getting that right. And then we also have two community members. I think everyone knows Theo Heselmans and Tom. Then we also have Tom Van Aken. Theo's a lifetime HCL Ambassador. Tom's an HCL Ambassador, and they both reside in Belgium. We're kind of a multi-international group today. We have Thomas from Germany, I believe and Max from the U.S., and myself down in Florida, and we have Graham up in Canada. And last but not least, Jesse, you're outside of Philadelphia. So we're kind of all over, as I'm sure you are. First of all, just in terms of asking questions, we ask that you ask your questions in the GoToWebinar interface, which I have shown on the screen right now. And please keep your questions related to today's content. If there's any other questions about OpenNTF, put them in our Slack channel. We'd love to see everyone there and participate in OpenNTF activities. So again, we're going to respond to all your questions verbally at the end of the presentations. A couple housekeeping things. First of all, a big thanks to the sponsors of OpenNTF. HCL has basically helped fund the organization, which pays for webinars like these, as well as contests. And once we get back to normal, we also use the funds we gather from our contributors for helping fund the various user groups. And we also like to have a big thank you to Prominent, who provides all sorts of free services to us, probably worth many thousands of dollars for hosting and just a day-to-day system admin. So thanks to both organizations. Again, OpenNTF, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is a user-driven community. We're all volunteers. No one takes a paycheck. The board members and many others spend a lot of their time helping run the site, helping put out projects. And so we're always looking for any sort of help, whether you want to do a project, help test a project, help run the organization, serve on the board, anything that you think you can contribute would be greatly appreciated. Just touch base with one of the board members, again, through our Slack channel is the best way to do that. Before we start the presentation, I'd just like to point out we've already planned our next webinar. This is going to be a real good one. We got a couple excellent administrators and even have a developer who are going to talk about optimizing your Domino servers. There's a lot of hidden tips and tricks that the presenters are going to share. So this is going to be a great webinar for not only admins but also developers. I strongly, urge you to pass the information around and get the word out about this. So let's just go ahead and get started. We're going to have our first presenter will be Thomas. So I'm going to make you the presenter, Thomas. And we'll get started. Hold on. And you should be the presenter now, Thomas.
All right. Thanks, Howard, for this wonderful introduction. And thanks, OpenNTF, for scheduling this webinar about Nomad Mobile tips and tricks. My name is Thomas Hampel. I'm a director at HCL Product Management. I'm responsible for the Domino server and the HCL Nomad product portfolio. Today with me, joined on the virtual stage, my colleague, Maxx Sutton, who is the team lead for the development lead for Nomad on iOS. And he is going to provide you with some development tips and tricks in the second part of the show. So I am going to start this off, going to kick this off by giving you a little bit of a background on what Nomad actually is. And yeah, that's because in the audience, I see a number of users, a number of customers out there that are probably new to this topic. So just to get this right, what is actually this HCL Nomad product? You all probably know about the Nodes client, and I'm trying to outline this with this graphic here on the right-hand side, the Nomad standard client with all its Eclipse-based user interface, which runs your apps, runs your mail. That one technically includes the Nodes basic client. The Nodes basic client does not include the Eclipse layer, but it is able to open up your Nodes apps, work with templates, work with formula language, LotusScript, and so forth. And technically, this is what the HCAA client originally was based on. And the HCAA client and Nomad, functionally wise, are taken off the same code stream. So HCL Nomad is the core of what keeps your business running. And it's a product that runs on your smartphones and tablets to support apps and mail with the formulas that you have been developing, the LotusScript stuff. It supports local replicas and allows to work offline, of course, with all the security and encryption that you are used to use from your traditional Nodes clients. Now, what we hear back from customers since we have introduced HCL Nomad is that it just works. The benefit is that you can take your existing applications on the go by just replicating or opening them on your smartphone without needing to modify them. So any design that you've done before is supposed to work just fine. But in the second half of this webcast, you're going to hear from Theo and Tom about some tips and tricks that will help your users to get an even better experience if you are applying a few tweaks to your design. Talking about Nomad availability, we first started our journey on iOS by cross-compiling the source code from our Node source code to HCL Nomad back in April 2019. That went live as a tablet-based version on iOS. We continued this journey in December 2019 on Android. The Android tablets continued. And in the same month, we released the smartphone version of Nomad on the iOS platform. And last but not least, we completed our journey with also supporting Android and Chrome OS phones. The journey of Nomad is going to continue. You probably have been listening to some of our webcasts in the past. We are already talking about HCL Nomad Web, a new journey, a new step into the future by running Nomad just in the context of a web browser. And just as a small note here, we went into a private beta for Nomad Web last year, 2020, in November, and are running a hosted beta since mid-December. We have started an on-prem beta just a couple of weeks ago. So customers out there who have signed up for the beta should have received an invitation to join the Nomad Web beta. So that's another interesting journey that we are starting here. Stay tuned for more. There's a lot more to come in this area. Today, we are talking about the mobile part of Nomad, which consists of the iOS code stream and the Android code stream. And just for reference, I've added a slide here to outline the release history, showing that these are two releases that are constantly being developed further, constantly adding new features on a monthly basis on Android. And you see that there were a couple of enhancements done on both sides. For instance, the recent release here on iOS, adding language support for Dutch, Russian, Polish, Swedish, Korean, and on the Android side, for instance, supporting Android Enterprise since January. These are important new additions. What are we going to do in the near-term future? Like in this month, you are going to see another release of Nomad iOS, which is going to provide enhanced support for selecting rich text in a rich text field, and also provides a new capability to support horizontal scrolling within the calendar. On Nomad on Android, you are going to see biometric authentication to be coming next. So that's scheduled for around April the 1st, just a couple of days remaining. So you see, we are adding quite some effort to make you happy by implementing the ideas that you have submitted. And this is a call to action. If you are missing out a feature, or if you would like to propose an idea on how to improve our product, please go to our ideation blog, to our AHA board, and add your idea or rank for an existing idea so that we can take it into account. I'd like to highlight 3 ideas that we are currently evaluating and potentially going to do in the near future, which is the first idea, to allow Nomad to scan a barcode. So instead of having to type a number, you can just take your phone, scan a barcode, and then get that information into your app. If you like that idea, please go to our AHA board and vote for this idea so that we hear your user voice. We hear what you're interested in. The second one, I think, is a very interesting one because it came up in a number of client conversations. It's the support for, supporting handwritten signatures. So you could then develop an app that would allow a user to just sign with a pen or sign with their fingertip on screen and thereby collecting the signature into your app. So if you like that idea, please vote for it. So we hear back if that's of your interest. And last but not least, another idea that we want to have your vote for, if you're interested, is the support of split view, meaning not the support of split view only, because it's to have a split view, which is especially of interest for the large scale iPads, where you then can drag and drop elements from one app to the other. So that's also a feature that was requested by, for now, like 47 customers out there. If that's of your interest, please go there, go to our AHA board and vote for it. Now, with that, enough of my introduction. I'd like to hand it over to Max, who is going to provide us the first tips and tricks, for instance, on how to manage HCL Nomad. So Max, can I hand over the screen sharing to you?
Yes, let's do that. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah. Howard, I don't know if you have to reassign presenter rights.
I missed your cue there, Thomas.
Okay.
1 second.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, yeah. And we're seeing your screen.
Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here speaking to everyone. And thank you to OpenNTF for hosting us. All right, so let's talk about some tips and tricks about Nomad Mobile. The first one that I want to talk about is really about managing Nomad Mobile. We have a really great management story, and it begins with Pen-Agenda Mobile Client. So with Pen-Agenda Mobile Client, you can configure all sorts of notes concepts for the Nomad client. It comes built in with Nomad on iOS and Android, so you don't have to do any other kind of installations or anything like that. Once you've installed it from the Google Play Store or the App Store, once you install Nomad, it's already there. If you already have Marvel Client configuring your notes clients, it's very simple to extend those configurations to also apply to HCL Nomad on iOS and Android. And you can also ensure that your client is configured from the very first launch, which is really important if you have some end users that you want to really set up so that they can get productive from the very first configuration of Nomad. You can do that very easily. You can create replicas on that first configuration. You can modify the recent apps page so that all the applications you want them to use is already available to them in the recent apps, and all they have to do is just open Nomad and tap the application to launch it. Agenda Mobile Client can also manage all sorts of other concepts here: local replicas, connection documents. They can apply application restrictions to the HCL Nomad application, and there's a lot more. So if you're interested, scan this QR code, take a look at the documentation. It's a great way to manage HCL Nomad. Of course, we also support the traditional mobile management story. So if you already have an MDM in your environment, you can configure and manage iOS and Android HCL Nomad clients. On iOS, we have implemented an app config definition, and on Android, we've implemented Android Enterprise. So all the major MDM players are going to be able to apply management to HCL Nomad Mobile. With management, you can do all sorts of things. You can manage some event settings, some restrictions, so you can prevent users from opening their mail, replication, do things like that. One nice tip that I would like to talk about here is actually setting the basic settings, the basic deployment settings. If you're an admin, you can configure the basic settings for your end user so that the Domino server host name, and the username are already pre-filled out for the user when they first open Nomad once it's been deployed to the device. So all the end user has to do at that point is just press next through the configuration panels, and they will have to just enter the Notes ID password, and that is it. It really helps streamline that setup process for the end user. So if you're an admin, definitely a nice tip and trick is to take advantage of the different ways that you can manage HCL Nomad. Okay, so let's get into some fun stuff here. Let's talk about tips and tricks for building Domino applications for mobile in mind. Okay, so the very first one here is the floating action button. This is also called the mobile action button as well. If you look at the image in the middle of this slide, you'll see that there is a view, and on the bottom right-hand corner of the view is a floating button. It's gray and it has like a menu lines on it. And if you tap that button, a menu is then displayed, and this menu contains all the actions that you've included for that view and for that mobile action button. So it's very easy to assign actions to this button. In Designer, you just go to the action properties and you check mark include action and mobile actions button. And as soon as there's at least one action that has been check marked in this way, that button will start to appear within your application whenever it's being executed or run on iOS or Android. So tablet, phone, whatever, on Nomad Mobile, this will be there for you. This is a really great way to make actions that you want to be front and center available to the user, as well as if you have any actions in the action menu that usually are not exposed anywhere else, but you need to expose them in Nomad Mobile, you can consider including them in the mobile actions button so that your user can then execute those actions in Nomad. The next thing we need to talk about is frame navigation. So this applies to phones only. So the Domino application typically ends up being a fairly complex thing, right? We have this concept of a frame set, and most applications have multiple frames within a frame set. And it turns out that there's a whole lot of content that we are trying to display for a form factor like a phone. And so one of the ways that we've tried to improve this experience for our users is by implementing this functionality called frame navigation. So what this is it allows the user to be able to actually navigate through the frames of the frame set, which gives the content within those frames more screen real estate to size to, right? So every time you open a Domino application, we will implicitly define a sequence for your Domino application in which a user can navigate through. An example here, very common frame set is the discussions database. And implicitly, we are already defining the notes navigator frame, which is the frame on the left-hand side, to be the first one, and then the view frame to be the second one in that sequence. So whenever a user presses the next frame action in the toolbar, they will navigate first to that notes navigator frame, and then if they tap that same action again in the toolbar, then it will then navigate to the view frame. So if you're a Domino application developer and you feel like there is a better way for users to navigate through your application on phone, it's very easily to define a sequence yourself. In Designer, starting with V11, you can actually go to your frame, go to the properties of the frame, and define the sequence there. So you'll see in the screenshot at the top right-hand side that I'm showing, there's a sequence field, and beside that is a ticker, and so you can actually define the frame to be between 1 and 15. And as soon as you have defined a frame to be 1, then we're going to start to use your defined frame sequence in our frame navigation. So some examples, maybe you want your users to navigate your application right to left instead of left to right. That is a case in which you would want to define a sequence. So this can be a very powerful tool to kind of help provide better usability for your Domino application when it's running on mobile phones. Okay, next is hide from mobile. So for a while now, actually, there has always been a mobile checkbox for hide wins in various different places and actions and fields. In V11, we added one in for columns. And recently, in the last year, Nomad has started to honor this setting. So Nomad on iOS and Android is mobile. And so whenever this checkbox is checkmarked for mobile, then that control is going to be hidden on iOS and Android. This does not apply to Nomad Web. You may be wondering what the difference is. Whenever I'm talking about mobile, that really just applies to iOS and Android, and it does not apply to Nomad Web. But this is an important tool because the mobile context is different than the desktop context, right? A lot of times you may want your users who are using your Domino applications on mobile to have a more pared down experience. Maybe you don't expect them to use the full range of function that you've built into your Domino application. Maybe you would expect them to just read a few documents and click a few actions instead. Maybe you don't need all the columns in your view. Maybe there's just a few very important ones that you can display. And so by paring down the functionality using these hide wins, you can really make a much more usable experience on the mobile platform, especially on phone. Tablet typically is a little bit larger, so you can get more of a desktop experience with your Domino applications. But on phone, this is particularly interesting. All right, so the next one, this is a very important one. I'm sure we will hear a little bit more about this later on, is app platform specific. So this is just a formula function called app platform. And when you apply the specific parameter to it, iOS and Android, so Nomad running on these different platforms, is going to return to you a text list. This text list is going to have a lot of very useful information that you can key off of. It will have the operating system, so we'll tell you that we are either iOS or Android. We will also report on the OS version. We also report on tablet or phone. So if we're a tablet, the third item in that text list is going to be tablet. For a phone, phone. And so you can key off of that to make all sorts of decisions in your application so that you can have your application launching a form for tablet and then you have a form for phone or whatever. You know, there's so many different things you can do with that. The next one is screen size. So that we will report the screen size in notes pixels. So an example is 800 by 1200. By the way, we always return the smallest value first, so this will not tell you the orientation of the device. But this is very useful because notes pixels are consistent between the platforms. So 500 notes pixels on a Windows desktop client is going to show you the same amount of a form as 500 notes pixels does on a iOS phone, right? So you can really kind of start to build out your experiences fairly easily if you start to consider notes pixels. And now we get into some of the real fun stuff. So in Designer V12, it's coming soon, and we have started to develop on a story, build out some new functionality to allow developers to build more responsive Domino applications. This is something that we've been hearing from our Domino application developers for a while. As you can see, there's a screenshot here of AHA. Domino application developers want to build out responsive experiences. And that's even more important now that Domino applications are running on mobile and soon will be running on web. And so we wanted to make sure that there was some functionality available in V12 that will better enable the Domino application developer to build more responsive applications. So let's begin. The first thing that we have is at resolution width. This is going to return the current Notes UI document resolution width in Notes pixels. And I've already spoken to you about what Notes pixels are, but whenever this formula function is executed, you're going to just, what's going to return is just the current document's resolution width, which is very useful and can be used in all sorts of different places, like a hide when formula. So an example here is if you have a column that does not always need to be there. If you are limited on space, you can make the design decision to hide it. Then you can now use at resolution width to hide that column when you don't have the space. There's also at resolution height, which is the same thing, except instead of returning width, it's just going to return the resolution height in those pixels. So this can be, this is the beginning of building out responsiveness, right? We need to give the application the context of the screen size that the application is sizing to. The next part is allowing the application to make change, to respond to it, right? So this is the second set of changes I'm presenting on here today. The first one is a new command. It's relayout window. So what relayout window does is it invokes a relayout of the application window. So an example of what that means is all of your hide when formulas that I was just talking about are going to be reevaluated whenever at command relayout window executes. Okay, so if you execute this command and the screen size has changed, then perhaps your hide when will now start to return true, and that column is going to be hidden where before it was visible. But then you have the problem, well, I don't want the user to have to execute like an action that will execute at command relayout window, right? This should be something that's automatic because it has to be automatic for it to be actually responsive. So the solution to that is that we have included a new form and view event called onSize. And this is going to trigger whenever there is a resolution change in the application window. So what does that mean? Well, on the desktop client, that would mean if you were to click on the top right corner and then drag the screen down to a smaller size, that would trigger an onSize event. On mobile, what that means is if you change the orientation of the device, so if you're in landscape and you go to portrait by just rotating the device, that's going to also trigger an onSize event because you're changing the resolution of the application window. So at this point, I want to do a demonstration of this because I feel like that's going to really help everyone understand what I'm talking about here. So let me minimize this. Okay, so on the screen here, I have my iPhone. This is an iPhone 10. It's not the largest device. It definitely has some limitations to screen real estate. And I have HCL Nomad installed, and you can see the icon there. I'm going to tap it to open it. Okay, so this is the first time I'm launching it. So it did need to use Face ID, so I've enabled biometric authentication on this Nomad client. And you saw I was able to log in fairly quickly there. So I'm going to open my demo application that I've made for this. It's called OnSlides Demo. And this is a very simple application that I've made just to really demonstrate the functionality that I'm describing here with these V12 designer changes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to navigate to the view, and I can use the frame navigation that I spoke to earlier by just tapping the next frame icon in the toolbar. Just tapping it twice gets me to the view. And I don't have any documents or anything in this application, but I do have a view, and you see that I have 2 columns here. The secret to this application is that there's actually 4 columns. And if I try to scroll left and right, it doesn't scroll because column 3 and 4 are hidden. And they're hidden because they're hidden because the hide when formula for them says the at resolution is less than 700, then they hide. And so because they're not visible right now, I'm assuming that the resolution width is less than 700, but we can actually check that. So on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, I have a mobile actions button. I can tap that, and I've included some actions here. And one is a action that will just prompt us with the resolution width. Okay, so when I execute that action, we get 368 returned. So of course, 368 is less than 700, so it's correct that column 3 and 4 are hidden. Now, what's interesting is what will happen if I rotate my device? I'm currently in portrait mode, but if I rotate it to be in landscape, then my resolution width is going to increase. And if it increases beyond 700, then I expect that those columns will appear, right? And so I'm going to rotate, and as you see, those columns do appear. And this is working with the onSize event. So that onSize event is triggering because the resolution of the application window is changing. And on that event, I am executing a @command relayout window. And that relayout window is then reevaluating all of the hide when formulas that I have in my view. And so it's causing column 3 and 4 to go from being hidden to being loaded within the application and represented here. We can check the at resolution width here again by tapping the mobile actions button and then tapping at resolution width. And that's going to return 717, right? And of course, 717 is greater than 700, and thus the column 3 and 4 are correctly shown. Okay, and just to convince you, we'll go back to portrait, and you'll see that those columns 3 and 4 are hidden again, because now the resolution width is less than 700. Okay, so we're starting to build a responsive application. All of a sudden, we have view columns that are only appearing when we have enough size in the application window to show them. Okay, so views are one thing, but let's talk about forms. So I'm going to open a new form in this application. And again, this is a very simple application. I'm just trying to demonstrate this new functionality here. So I have this paragraph in this form. It says the button to the right hides when the resolution width is less than 700. The button below hides when the resolution width is greater than 700. So there's no button on the right. So if I scroll over there, there's no button there, right? So I can assume that the resolution width is less than 700. I can also check it because the buttons here actually tell me the resolution width. It prompts me with the resolution width. So by tapping that button, it's reporting that the resolution width currently is 375. So 375 is less than 700. So it's correct that there's no button to the right of this paragraph. And 375 is less than 700, so the button below should be visible, right? So what happens if I rotate the device? If I rotate the device, we should see something similar to what we saw with the view, where the bottom button should disappear and the button on the right should appear, right? So I'm going to rotate my device, and immediately what you see responsively, right? You see the bottom button now becomes hidden and the button on the right appears. Because what's happening here is the onSize event is triggering because the application window size is changing. And on the onSize event, we are executing the at command relayout window. And that is causing the hide-when formulas to be applied here. So I've got two different buttons, and each button has a different hide-when formula, right? Described it in the paragraph text that I've got there. And so I can check the at resolution width, and indeed the resolution width is greater than 700, it's 724, and it makes sense that the right button is now visible and the bottom button is not. And just to convince you further, if we switch the orientation of the device back to portrait, you can see that the right button is now hidden and the bottom button reappears. And so this is just a basic demonstration. There's a whole lot that you can do here. And I'm not saying that we want developers necessarily to create more controls so that they can make a responsive application. This is really, again, the beginning of this responsive story that we're working on and what we're shipping in V12. But it does give application developers a lot of ability to make things within their applications, within their forms and their views responsive by hiding them and making them appear when the application is at various different resolutions. Okay, and so that's that for this demo. The next thing I just want to point out here, I actually have a home screen shortcut on my device called Business CRM. And this is actually a shortcut to my notes application demo that I created. So if I close this and then I tap Business CRM, what you'll see is it goes to this thing called shortcuts and then immediately opens up my demo application in HCL Nomad. So I have a shortcut to a demo application directly on my home screen. And that's the next tip and trick I'm going to talk to you about. So this uses the shortcuts application, which you see there on the right-hand side of my screen. And let me go back to my PowerPoint slide. And I just want to briefly, with the remaining time that I have here, just kind of discuss how to do this, because I have gotten asked by Domino application developers a number of times now, hey, can we make shortcuts on the home screen to my Domino application? And the answer is yes. The user can make the shortcut using this method that I'm about to talk through. Also, and this is specific to iOS, but also MDMs are able to create home screen shortcuts as well. So if you are using MDM, take a look at your MDM's documentation and see if they have that functionality. So as a user, if you want to create a shortcut, and this is something I do for all my applications, I have a shortcut for mail, for my team room, and so on. You first need to use the iOS shortcuts application. So if you do not have it installed yet, you can install it from the App Store. This is an application provided by Apple to go through this process and to create these home screen shortcuts. Once you have it, you launch it. You can create different types of shortcuts, and for this you want to create a web shortcut actually. So tap web, and then you're going to have different options for web, and you want to select open URLs. And so we're at 4 now. So at 4, you're basically going to be able to paste a link. And very simply, you can just paste your Domino application link using the notes link format into this text field, and then you can name the shortcut however you want. So if you go to the next step, you can name the shortcut. You can change the icon, so you can change the glyph to be all sorts of different things. That was the glyph that I thought represented a CRM the best. You can change the color, so yellow, of course, is my favorite color to use with Nomad. And then you can just add it to the home screen. And very simply, just like that, you have a shortcut to your Domino application that you built on the home screen of your iOS device. Okay, and I think with that, that is everything that Thomas and I had to share in terms of tips and tricks with HCL Nomad Mobile, and we'll transition to Theo and Tom to hear from them.
Okay, thanks, Max. That was some cool stuff coming in V12, and we have a lot of questions about that we'll get to at the end of Tom and Theo's presentation. Tom, I'm making you the organizer. or not organizer, presenter. And we see your screen. Oh, we saw your screen, not anymore. And we see, there we go. You see it now.
Okay, Tom, can you switch to your PowerPoint, please? There you go. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we saw some great stuff that is already there in the new Nomad, and which is coming up for version 12. So let's have a quick look at some of the stuff and see how we implemented those. Yeah. Next slide, Tom. Tom, next slide. Thank you. So this is the agenda we're having. We're going to do both of us. So just a few slides for each one of us, and then we're going to talk about why would you develop a touch device? What are the main advantages of doing this? Then we're going to look at a classic Notes app, and we're going to see that it does work on Nomad, but yeah, we can do a lot better than that. And then we're going to show you how we did this. And finally, Tom is going to conclude with some really neat stuff that you have to keep in mind. So me, it looks like I'm an HCL Grandmaster. That's an old title. Excuse me, I forgot to change that at the top. It should be HCL Lifetime Ambassador. I've been doing notes for a long time. I still love it, and I got my own business, Exceed. And as you will find out, yeah, by the way, I'm doing the Engaged User Group. You'll hear a lot more about it next week. And I like wine, but you'll notice that in a second.
Okay, so my name is Tom van Aken. I'm an HCL Ambassador. I'm doing notes development since version 3.5, so that's a long time already. I was an IBM champion in 2019 and HCL Ambassador in 2020 and 2021. I prefer beers, but I can do with wines too. And well, apart from being a developer, I'm also a table tennis coach. So why would we develop for mobile devices? Well, more and more devices have a touch interface, and that's great, but we have to use it. And advantages are that they are easy, lightweight, and you don't have a keyboard. Well, you don't need a keyboard or a mouse. You can just use your fingers to navigate around. And yeah, they offer a great user experience because you can integrate GPS or you can use your camera. When you want to use smartphones, that's well, they are even more common than tablets because almost everybody has a smartphone nowadays, and they offer bigger advantages than tablets. Well, on one hand, because they can fit in your pocket, and that is at least if you're not using the most recent versions or if you have large pockets. They share the UX advantages of tablets, but the screen is much smaller, and that requires specific design of your application to show less data or at least present the data in a different way. In the past, it was hard to get Notes Domino data on your mobile device, but now with Nomad, it's easy. Nomad is a real game changer, as Thomas and Max already explained. You can make almost any native Notes application run on your mobile device. Add formulas LotusScript are supported as long as you don't use OS specific functionality like Windows functions or whatever. You can even use your camera and GPS to enhance your application, and just as a regular Notes client, you can create local replicas, and it uses your well, it uses your user ID, so security and policies are kept in place. I'm going to give the word back to Theo, and he's going to explain what he did with his wine tasting app.
Well, like I said before, I love wine, right? And I try to keep, whenever I taste some interesting wine, I try to keep track of what I tasted, so I can remember it for the future. Yeah. Now, I created a wine app in Notes, and that works, but like Tom said, then you need to have a laptop or a computer to look at them, and that wasn't very efficient when tasting wine, so I needed something really cool. So I made this application, and it's okay. I mean, the navigation is there, but it's pretty boring. I got some categorized views, nice, but it's too small if you have big fingers. And typical for fonts also, they're overloaded, the fonts are too small, headed too big. I mean, it's not really fitted, it's not a nice fit for a tablet or for a smartphone. Next slide, Tom. So I said, look, how can we do this better? So I try to make things a lot nicer. On the left-hand side, you see an image which we got on a tablet. On the right-hand side, the same thing, but on Android, on an Android smartphone, right? So that was the homepage. Whenever you click on one of the big buttons, yeah, you can't miss them. You're in a view, and in the view, we try to limit the amount of information we see there. So to make it much more attractive, we can have a drop down where we select the year. You can have a filter. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see that we got an embedded preview actually of whatever you click on. And on the right-hand side of this slide, you see the same, well, a similar thing for an Android smartphone, except that, of course, the screen real estate is smaller, so we had to adapt and change things. Yeah. You can make it much more interesting than a typical categorized view. Instead of having a categorized view based on continents, we show here a nice map of the world. You click on one of the continents and immediately you jump to a view, well, kind of view. I'll show you afterwards how we did that. But we can show you information about this particular continent automatically from within this map we got there. Yeah. Okay, Tom? Yeah. So we apparently here we clicked on Europe. You immediately see all the wines from Europe, and in this case also Spain was selected, and we see all the wines we tasted from Spain. Still one of my favorite countries for red wine, that is. Apparently, Tom, who created the Android app, is more interested in France. Yeah. Go ahead, Tom. Yeah. If we double click on one of the view entries, then we get to the document. And notice also here that I try to mimic kind of the iOS interface, where we got our labels on the left-hand side, labels which normally are on top. I put them on the left-hand side, where we go from wine info to tasting notes to wine labels to similar wines. And you see that also the information there is presented much bigger than what we normally do on a laptop, right? And on the right-hand side, you see the same information, but of course restructured so it fits one below the other. And instead of having the tabs on the left-hand side on a tablet, because there we have a lot more screen real estate, we put them there on top with a nice icon also, so user can easily switch from one tab to another and can see the information, but much more vertically oriented. All the default things, and that's the nice thing about Nomad, that if there is a possibility, native controls are supported. As you can see, both on the left and on the right-hand side, that if you select the date, you see in this case on the left-hand side a nice iOS date picker, and on the right-hand side the standard date picker for Android. Yeah. And it's all built in. You don't have to do anything about it. Just make sure that your field is type of date. Yeah. You can embed images, of course, no problem. It's a rich text, and you just embed the image. And if you're in edit mode, then you can even just use your camera, like Tom said. You can just use your camera and then import an image. Yeah. This is just an embedded view. Yeah. So we just inside this form, we just embed a view like we normally do on a Nodes client interface. I mean, it's all exactly the same thing. It's just an embedded view. On the right-hand side, it's the same thing. I mean, on the right-hand side, you see the same thing for Android. It's just an embedded view you put onto your form, and it just works. Yeah. On the previous slide, you saw that there was an icon there for going to the map. Well, when you click on it, it automatically jumps to the native built-in map application. So in this case, on the left-hand side, you see that it opens up the iOS map application from Apple, and on the right-hand side, you see it opens up the Google Map on Android. And it's extremely easy to do. Just make sure that you download the applications which are available in OpenNTF for free. Just have a look at it, how it's done. I'm going to talk a little bit about it afterwards, I think. Okay, Tom. Yeah. Now, Max already explained a little bit about how to distinguish between the devices. Well, here we've got a few examples. If you use a regular ad platform, it just says iOS, Android, or Windows 32. Yeah. If you use ad platform specific, you have a list that's returned. Yeah. So first you got the iOS, and you can see below how it looks like on the iPad, iPhone, and on an Android smartphone. First you got the OS itself, which is the same as ad platform without specific. The second part of the list is the OS version, yeah, which could be useful if you say, look, there are some things we support only on a specific version of the OS. Then you can check this. Then we got the device, and that's very simple. It's just tablet or phone. Yeah. By the way, guys, watch out, because if you're using an earlier version of Nomad, then it did not say phone for an iPhone. It said iPhone for an iPhone. So that's changed now to the better. Now it's just a tablet or a phone. Yeah. So then at least, I mean, I use this most of the time to distinguish between whether it's a tablet or a phone, because it's so convenient. Of course, you could also use the fourth parameter, which is the screen resolution. Yeah. It's just a comma-separated text list where you got first the horizontal width and second the vertical width. Yeah. But it's really good, and it's really nice to create tailored forms or subforms of views depending on device or size. Okay, Tom. Yeah. So how did we do it? On the first page, we have seen that we got these huge buttons. It's nothing but a table in my case. I mean, there's multiple solutions, of course, but I just used the table and I put some background images on it. Yeah. And on top of those background images, so in the cell itself, I put some text, and I made the text clickable, just a hotspot. And you notice that in the hotspot, I just say, okay, save the title of what I clicked, save it in the environment WT title, and then I open up a frame set which is called year vintage, and that's it. I mean, like I said, there are multiple ways to do this. You can use like I did, for instance, for the world map, where I just got one huge image and I put some hotspots on top of it, yeah, some graphical hotspots. I mean, there are a lot of things you can use layers, but I'm not really keen on using layers, so I thought this was the easiest way to do it. I always go for easy. Okay, Tom? So this is more interesting, because what we do here is we got a frame set, yeah, which at the top we just got a title, yeah, and below that we got actually a form with an embedded view. And the reason why we use a form with an embedded view, oh, sorry, we also have a preview pane, but the reason why we use a form with an embedded view is because we can have filters at the top, and the filters will automatically make sure that the embedded view, the content of the embedded view, will be changed, it will be updated based on those filters. Well, with filters, I just mean a drop down or arrows or whatever we want to put there. Yeah. But it's very simple, very easy to do, and it's pretty powerful. Okay. Yeah. So here you see that I have a country drop down, but I also have, for instance, some buttons. And because notes cannot make, you cannot color your buttons. Well, you can color your buttons, but you cannot change your button depending on whether it's highlighted or not. So it's pretty simple. I just make every button twice, and I just use some show and hide formulas to see whatever I selected. Easy to do, but the effect is that whatever button you select, in this case, let's say I select rosé, automatically the selected the gray rosé button will be shown, and all the other buttons will be white, so they're still selectable. So it's very easy to make these kinds of interfaces, and it's just a hide-when formula. Yeah. And again, you see that the embedded view there is based on whatever is in the field. Yeah. So when I click on red, the field type is changed to red, the country is changed to all, and I just do a refresh field, and automatically my embedded view with a single category is refreshed. For the navigator, actually the same thing, the navigator with the icons. I just make them all twice, and with a hide-when formula, one of them will be visible. And because it's a bit more difficult, I use programmatically switchable tables. Very easy to do, except that you have to be careful in how you switch your embedded form, because I use an embedded form. Oh, sorry, no, I'm sorry. Let me redo this. I use a table, and based on the tab that needs to be visible, in this case it's $main, I change it, and the table will be changed. But it's a little bit different depending whether you're in edit mode or in read mode. Yeah. But it works very well, and it's not a lot of code, but you need to be aware of that. Okay, Tom. This one is the last one. So if you have an action bar, I created some, I just found on the internet some nice icons, and I used custom icons instead of the default notes ones. You can either align them left or right. Don't overdo, don't make too many buttons there. Show only the icon. And like I said, when using URL open, the add command URL open, you can open up any native notes application. You can even, I did it for a customer of mine where they clicked on it, and on a phone number, for instance, automatically the phone started dialing that number. Just by using the add URL open, you can do a lot. It's very convenient, and it works like a charm. Next slide. And now it's up to you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. So I'm going to give you some more tricks of things that I found out when developing for Nomad, and especially for a phone. You don't see it apparently. Now you see it. You see that the form is a bit dancing around, and this happens when you use a standard form and you want to scroll it up or down. It can be really nasty because the width of the form is not aligned with the width used on your device. To avoid this kind of behavior, it's really easy. Just set the margin at 2 centimeters instead of 2.54, and you can go. Then create a table at 2 centimeters. Create a table fit to window, and make sure that that there is no border on the table. And I would suggest to set a row and column spacing of at least 0.1 centimeters to avoid that your text is sticking really to the edge of your screen. But when you do this, when you use this technique, then you can just scroll up and down without your form starting to dance. Another thing that I found out on Android, I'm not sure if I thought on iOS it was okay, but on Android, not all fonts are supported. So you can play around with it and test it, but I found out that Arial, Verdana, Tahoma, they all give the same result. So I would suggest just use the default sans serif font, and you're okay. And if you use size, color, that all works. Also, the text styles work, but well, the fonts they don't all work on Android, so don't bother choosing a good font. As already mentioned a few times, the width is very limited, especially on a phone again. And of course, you want in a view, you want to show as much data as you can. And I would give you 2 tips to do that. Use icons. An icon says more than text and is usually smaller. So I have 2 screenshots here from 2 different applications. The left one from the Wine app, and the other one is from another app where we wanted to use the department where specific data was shown for. And yeah, an icon makes it much nicer to look at. And if you would show the complete department name in that column, that would be too large, so it wouldn't work. Another thing you can do is make use of the height of your rows. You can set the height of a row to multiple lines, and when you use the multi-values separator, then you can put your data below each other instead of in columns next to each other, and then you can show more data on a smaller screen. On Android, however, there is one small caveat with that. If the complete text of all the multiple values can fit on a row, then the new line separator does not always work. So you see this in the screenshots where the marked rows, all data is shown on one line instead of the 3 lines that we would expect. There is a workaround for that, and that is by adding blanks behind each individual value, and then you can make sure that the data does not fit on one row, and then it will be all okay. I have an example of this formula, but I did not put it in the slides because it's too technical. But I can put it in the slides when you can download the slides. So I'll put it in the slides afterwards. Another thing is the tabs. By default, an app in Nomad opens each form on a separate tab, just like the Notes client does. Although it is a custom behavior for a Notes user, this is difficult to use on a phone. The tabs become so small that you can't read them, and it's even harder to close them sometimes. And therefore, when you use a frame set to encapsulate your complete application and use set target frame to open parts of your application inside of a frame of your frame set, then you can make sure that your complete application works in one frame. And this has 2 benefits. First, you have less tabs. And second, it works more like other mobile applications where you have only one screen and you don't have to switch tabs all the time. The hardest thing when developing for mobile devices is the limited screen width, but to make it worse, a larger screen doesn't always mean that it can contain more data. And this depends on the resolution and the pixel density of your device. But that makes it hard to develop against. Max already showed a couple of ways that you can that you will be able to use it to avoid problems with the new add formulas that are coming in V12. But still, the only advice I can give you is if you can avoid using a lot of different devices, avoid it. If you can decide which devices to be used for Nomad in your company, then I would suggest to limit the number of types of devices, and test on as many devices as possible, because an application that looks great on your phone might look really awful on another phone as well. Then there are some things, but Max already told you about the floating action button. Also, when you right-click in your Notes application, you can have actions in your right-click menu. If you use a long press, then you have those same actions on your mobile device. So you can still use the right-click actions in a view or in a form. And the hide on mobile, as Max already explained, is also active now. It has a use now. Maybe things for the near future. Yeah, the add command and the resolution width and resolution height formulas were already mentioned. But another thing is in your action properties, you have the option to show the action on swipe left and right, but it's not yet implemented. So you don't have to click it because it doesn't work yet. Hopefully it will work in a future version, but that I don't know. And that's about it. So I don't know if there are more questions, then we will answer them. And thank you all.
We have a lot of questions queued up. Let me just switch presenters here real quick, and we'll start doing some questions. Okay, just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, if you haven't already, go to the GoToWebinar questions pane, and we're going to ask our different presenters all your questions that are queued up already, and we should have time for more. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them now. So Graham, do you have the first question?
I'm going to answer the standard question that we get asked all the time. Is the session being recorded? Yes, it is. Where is it going to be available? On openntf.org/webinars. And there was also a question that just came that says where are the slides to the session going to be posted? They get posted on SlideShare, but the link also gets posted on the /webinars page. So for everything to do with all of the webinars that we've done, you can go to openntf.org/webinars.
Thanks. Yep, the link is in the chat if you didn't get that. So I guess the first question that there was a question about shortcuts, and I think Max answered this. The specific question was on Android desktop. Max, will the shortcuts that you're planning also work on Android? I remember you mentioned iOS.
So speaking directly to iOS, and those shortcuts are just made through the shortcuts application. For Android, we'll look into seeing if we can document any similar process, but I do not have that ready at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Next question.
Go
it
ahead,
says,
Graham.
Will Nomad Mobile also support SAML and TOTP?
That's a question for Thomas.
Question.
Yeah, we have been looking into this. Currently, it does not support SAML and TOTP, but yeah, we are looking into this and would like your voice heard. So please rank and prioritize this in AHA by voting for it. Just a side note on that is that we have recently introduced TOTP support for Domino, meaning a Domino web application can leverage TOTP, which is two-factor authentication if you don't know. And we are also looking into adding TOTP support into the other clients. Now, this is a major piece of work and also comes along with different challenges because, for instance, how would you do two-factor authentication if you are completely offline, which, by the way, a phone can be in offline mode in some cases. So there are some design challenges that Max and the team will have to resolve, and that's why it's on the radar, but not something that we are going to deliver next week.
Okay, thanks. Have a question from Bernd. What version of Designer is needed for the mobile action buttons?
That is Designer version 11.
Version 11. Okay, thank you.
Next question was about hiding columns. So hiding columns on mobile only, does that apply to view columns and or table columns?
Specifically view columns.
Okay.
Let me make this clear. The hide when formulas can of course be used everywhere. So you could say hide a specific element when a condition is met. So that's how, Max, how you showed you were doing this demo where the button was shown either below or on the right side of the table based on the screen resolution. So there are ways to hide information based on a formula.
Yeah. We have been using it also in the discussion database where we're hiding columns just based on the fact whether it's a tablet or whether it's a phone, and just use the add platform in the hide when. Works like a charm.
Okay, thank you.
We had a question. This is actually going to be a good lead-in for a future webinar. Heather asked about Nomad Web, and Thomas pointed out that Nomad Web is a little different. But also, we are planning on doing a Nomad Web webinar once Nomad Web, it's hard to say, ships in a couple months. So we'll be working with Thomas and the team at HCL. So once that's generally available for everyone, we'll have a specific webinar on Nomad Web, just like we're doing today on Nomad Mobile.
Okay, next question. Bob asks, what port does Nomad Mobile use?
Oh, good one. Nomad Mobile is nothing else than a notes client on your smartphone or tablet, and by default it uses the NRPC protocol. So 1352 is the default TCP port. However, we recently added support for the SafeLinks proxy. So if you are in a network situation where port 1352 is not allowed, meaning if your smartphone is, for instance, on the internet and your Domino server is behind a firewall, and port 1352 not being allowed to route through this firewall, you can install Nomad proxy, meaning the SafeLinks proxy, and transition expose externally port 443, which Nomad Mobile is going to use, to the internal port 1352. A small teaser here on the Nomad Web, this side of things, the SafeLinks proxy will be required because Nomad Web can only communicate on port 443. And that's why this is a technical dependency. But we are going to talk more about this in the webinar about Nomad Web.
Thomas, you're awesome. You killed two questions with one answer because that was that addresses the next question too. So we can move on from there.
All right.
There was a question. I'll just answer this quickly because I know Thomas provided the information. The availability of version 12, which is in beta now, will be in the second quarter of this year, according to Thomas. So stay tuned. So,
okay, next question from Eric. Are these changes to enable responsive applications already supported by the latest Nomad build on test flight so that I could start evaluating them once I get my hands on Domino Designer 12?
They are not yet available in test flight. They will be available closer to when V12 ships. It will be available prior to V12 shipping. but just stay tuned and keep a lookout on the release notes for both Android and iOS.
Right, thanks, Max. So we have a question from Carl in New Hampshire. Hey, Carl. Are there any plans for a kiosk type mode or the ability to launch right into a specific application from the home screen? I think part of that is the shortcuts, but anything you guys want to add? I know, Thomas, you mentioned there's an AHA idea that's being voted on. And by the way, I think Thomas is going to mention a couple other ideas that are in the database, the AHA database. And in the slides that we get post, we'll have the links to these various things. Thomas is going to pull together one page that had the links to all these different AHA ideas that you could vote on. Go ahead, Thomas.
So kiosk mode, we heard this request, but only a few people were asking for it yet, so that's why it's not implemented yet. Max was showing the idea of adding an icon to your home screen, which I think is what Carl was asking for, to tap into a specific application. But the same question can also be understood in a different way, which means to lock down Nomad so that it can only open a single application. That's a different ask, which is currently not implemented. So that's why we need people to vote for this idea, so that it will be ranked higher in our priority list.
Okay, there were a couple of questions just about, well, duplicating questions from before about finding out more information on ports and safe links and configuration. And of course, that documentation will be coming as soon as Max has got it. So next question then, which was kind of asked before as well, but is there a way to capture a user's handwritten signature using Nomad on a mobile device?
We touched base on this question in the early beginning. Currently, that is not possible, but it's probably one of the next features that we are going to implement. If you like this idea, I'm going to post the link to the idea in the handout slides. So can you please vote for it so that we see the demand out there. We believe it's a rather interesting story, and we would like to get this done probably sooner than later. But I cannot name a specific date yet.
Okay, I think that would be a useful feature myself. Quick question from Bernd: are calendar views supported?
Max, can you just confirm that it is?
Yes, calendar views are supported. There is some scrolling limitations in calendar views on iOS and Android. You can't vertically scroll in like the day, and we're just now implementing horizontal scrolling on iOS in the calendar view. But there's other ways to navigate through calendar view. So it is supported. There are just a few limitations that are still outstanding.
Okay, next question from David. In version 12, are the classic standard templates for journal, document library, and discussion database going to be updated to play nicely with Nomad? These templates are HCL showcases and are still useful.
Of course, we have to do this, but we need to do this in stages. So not all templates will be optimized on day one, but we have started this journey already.
Okay, we have a question from Mark. If you're in Verse or Traveler and you have a Notes doc link, will that open up in Nomad?
Yes, it will absolutely open in Nomad. So you can just press that link, and either on iOS or Android, it will proceed to open the HCL Nomad client and then open the link itself.
Okay. Question here, how can we technically design an application which looks nice on iOS and Android? Are there best practices that are documented?
I think that's more a question for Theo, or was Theo answering this already in the chat?
I answered that already. I think just go to OpenNTF and look at the project for the wine tasting. There's a lot of documentation in there. The application, the full application is there. Just open it up in Designer and see how we did things. I mean, it's not difficult at all. It's just that you have to be aware and play with it. And it's just a matter of using the hide when formulas A and B, just based on the platform. You just switch between the correct view or form or subform. And it's pretty straightforward to do, but just have a look at it and you'll learn a lot, I'm pretty sure.
I think, too, it's worth mentioning the HCL Digital Solutions Academy as a place that HCL is investing in to develop those best practices documentation. And I'm not aware that there's anything in there specific to Nomad, but I know that there's work being done by HCL to develop materials for all of the topics, for all of the products and digital solutions. So that's another place to potentially check out.
Okay, so we have another question about Nomad Web and time, and we're going to defer that to a later webinar. And there was also a question, the current version of Nomad Mobile. I guess I'll just answer this and you guys can jump in. It's basically the shipping version's 11, and I assume you need an 11 server and obviously an 11 designer. But then there's a lot of new functions and features in 12 coming out that's already out in the beta. Anything you guys want to add from HCL on that?
I think it's multiple questions in one.
Yeah.
What's the current version of Nomad Mobile? The version number is different on iOS than it is on Android. The version that you will find in the Apple App Store or in the Android Play Store is the current one, which as of today is on iOS, it's 10.11, and on Android, it's 10.15, if I'm not mistaken. But they will always be current. We are releasing to the app stores, and if you have configured your mobile device to auto update the apps, you will always get the latest. What version of Domino server supports Nomad Mobile? Well, technically, Nomad Mobile can communicate with any Domino server that is actively being supported, meaning it does not require Domino to be on version 11. It can technically also communicate with a Domino server on version 10 or on a version 9 Domino server. It is beneficial to have an ID vault deployed simply because of setting up Nomad on a mobile device. It's a lot easier when there is an ID vault. But when it comes to the communication between the mobile device and the server, yeah, even a version 9 server will work.
Right, and so we don't have a concept for testing or beta testing the new V12 features in Nomad. Unfortunately, those features will only be available for testing as Nomad gets closer to releasing those functionalities, and that will occur as we get closer to the V12 release timeframe.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this earlier on, the Domino Designer checkboxes to hide elements from mobile or the swipe left and swipe right controls. These are features of the Domino Designer in version 11. So at least the checkboxes are being displayed in the version 11. So if you are still using Domino Designer version 9, you will not see them. And it's time to upgrade to a more modern Domino Designer.
A little plug there.
Maybe Theo, I'll get you to unmute yourself. So there's a question here, just to follow on from the earlier one about best practices, and it's specific to nice looking images for the particular OS. I'm going to suggest that there's no magic there, but maybe Theo, you could share your experience on how you found the images that you used for your demo.
I mean, Google is your friend, right? just Google for iOS icons or for Android icons, and you find huge amount of libraries there, and just pick the one you like.
Yeah. And this is Max. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I would also say to that it's indeed in Google there are a lot of font sets and icon sets that are free to use, and yeah, it's just like depending on your own taste which icons you want to use. But on the internet you can find a lot of icon sets that can be useful specific for your application or in general.
And what I was going to say, if you want to make your application look consistent with the look and feel of Nomad and the icons that we present, we use the Carbon design system. And so if you look that up in Google, all those icons are available and you can incorporate those icons into your application as well.
Awesome. Okay, we're under 5 minutes before the end here, so I think we want to try and be short and sweet with our answers, and I'll probably do a little bit more picking and choosing here. We've already talked about the ETA on Domino version the next release of Nomad coming out with V12. So let's jump to, have you found a method for importing items from the Android file system, looking at saving a customer signature and then loading it into the Notes application? That's probably, well, let's go quick on that one.
There's no documented method to do that as of right now. If that is a functionality that you require, AHA is a great place to put that, and we can look into it.
Cool. Howard?
So there was, Soren had a question, a selection in views like zip code, not easy to do, like type down to a specific town. Not quite sure.
So is
like
that like a type
ahead
ahead
for zip codes?
That makes sense. Okay, let's go on.
Max?
Max, did you get the question if there is any method to do like a type ahead of typing a zip code and then displaying the city name or something like this? This is at least how I understand this question.
Yeah, he said type down, but I guess he might be meant type ahead.
Yes, that functionality does not exist as of right now, but I do see how that could be very useful. So that's another good candidate for AHA.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think same answer as well for the other question from Soren about searching in a view doesn't work as good on the Notes client. Again, back to AHA.
Can Nomad have multiple users on the same device?
You are not able to switch the user on Nomad. Typically, mobile devices are they're designed to be single user, though the actual use case, a lot of people are now starting to hand devices off in factories and things like that. So this is something that we have an AHA for. If you want Nomad to be able to support switching users, then there's already AHA. Maybe Thomas, if you could find that and link that below. But that is a story that we're looking at, but it's not implemented today.
Yeah, and that's because we hear this question quite a bit from people who are administrators and they are managing multiple different domains. So they have to switch IDs to manage like one domain and then switch to another ID to manage the other one, or switch between their user ID and their admin ID. They are valid stories, but they are limited user base here. So that's why it was deferred in our priority list. However, we see a demand out there, especially with the use case of devices being passed around to, for instance, shift workers or others where multiple people use the same device but need to use the device with their own identity. We are going to take a look into this, and we'd like you to raise your voice by voting for the AHA idea. I'm going to put a link into the slide deck for reference.
All right, well, we're pretty much at the bottom of the hour. There's still a handful of questions. So we'll do like we did for the Docker webinar and answer those questions in a blog post. So I'll follow up with the gang here on that and get that posted up as soon as we can. But I think, Howard, we can wrap.
Okay, thanks, Graham, and a big thanks to our presenters. This is a very informative, webinar. Nomad looks like it definitely solves a lot of use cases in terms of moving your Notes client app outside the Notes client. So we're going to post the recording, of course, and then the slides. And in the slides from Thomas, we'll have links. I guess we'll have a page that has links to the various ideas that you can vote on. So definitely check that out and go to those links. And we can put that in the blog post as well. I think that that will answer some of the questions we didn't get to today. So that might take a week or so to get. So give us a little time. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next month for our Domino Admin Best Practices webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.